How do we get it started?
Put it on. The headsets were so... I mean, they are molded to our heads.
I've got it. I've got the one I used. Everybody else has got plastic ones. I got the real one.
Whoever the genius was, and it wasn't me, sadly, that came up with it being a purely reflective surface was the bane of our lives.
Well, one of the saddest I think we've ever seen, Steve, was when we announced that these headsets were going to be all mirrored.
At first I thought, are you just f***ing with me?
Literally everything is reflected.
It couldn't be matte black. Wouldn't that be just as cool?
No, that's not going to look as good. What about if the insides? Could the insides be matte, perhaps, in some places? No, that's not going to look as good.
But no, they said it has to be chrome. I do admit, now that it's done, it looks pretty bitchin'.
Hi, I'm DB Weiss.
Hi, my name is Minkie Spiro.
I'm David Benioff.
Hi everyone, tēnā koutou katoa, daja hao. My name is Jess Hong.
And I'm Alexander Woo.
Hi, my name is Steve Kullback, and I'm the visual effects producer.
I'm the director of Judgment Day of Three Body Problem.
I'm Cunningham. I play Thomas Wade in the epic Three Body Problem.
And I played Jin Cheng in Three Body Problem.
This is Making a Scene from Variety.
And you are watching Variety's Making a Scene.
The universe has more dimensions than the three we occupy. They are hidden.
When I first read the script, I won't use French here, but I was WTF.
It's extraordinary. How the hell are they going to do this?
My first reaction to it was like, whoa, first off, that's a lot. And I had to come back to it to digest it.
When they're trying to explain 10 dimensions, when not even the people who get paid to study 10 dimensions can explain it. And we're going to do it for a TV show. It's quite a hurdle.
This particular scene in Three Body Problem was essential in catapulting the audience to the end of the show, because without understanding this key information, it was hard to truly appreciate what was at stake for Earthlings, for basically humankind. How do you make that unstoppably watchable, even though it was like an intense amount of expo dump?
It was a very scientifically involved explanation of what was going on, involving concepts like quantum entanglement, which, spoiler, we don't actually totally understand completely, but we understand well enough thanks to the books and some ancillary reading. But reading is one thing, watching is another thing.
Well, if you look at the section in the books, that sequence from Judgment Day to the explanation of what a sophon is, that covers, if I had to guess, somewhere around 200 pages. It's a lot.
What's really clever about the scene is that they have the incredibly difficult proposition of explaining what the show is about. The whole thing is in this scene, and it's the first time Wade enters the game.
Prepare yourself for something very strange.
There was a lot of headset maintenance involved to get them looking that perfect.
Whoever the genius was, and it wasn't me, sadly, that came up with it being a purely reflective surface was the bane of our lives.
Well, one of the saddest I think we've ever seen, Steve, our VFX bizarre, was when we announced that these headsets were going to be all mirrored.
At first I thought, are you just fucking with me?
Literally everything is reflected. The camera, the boom, the crew.
It couldn't be matte black. Wouldn't that be just as cool and not cause us 300 shots that we need to paint out the entire crew in?
And he's like, well, is there any chance like we could have some matte like sides to them? Or like, no, that's not going to look as good. What about if the insides? Could the insides be matte perhaps in some places? No, that's not going to look as good.
Every setup with that headset, once we'd called cut, the set had to be handed over to the VFX team.
The VFX team had to laboriously photograph both the headset and then the environment around it so that they could recreate the reflections on the headsets later, which is really time consuming.
In every environment that this headset appears in, we shoot a tiled image of every square inch of that room. And we basically do tile, 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 and come up with a photograph that we can stitch together, and then that is reprojected on top of the headset in the place of all of the crew members and camera gack that appears in the environment.
I dread to think how many supercomputers they had to use and how long it took to render that nightmare.
I do admit, now that it's done, it looks pretty bitchin'.
And we will teach you how to fear again.
These headsets are really heavy, and when you put them on, they're quite tight, and you can't see.
When you put them on, because they're mirrors on the inside, you can actually have like a close kind of soul-searching moment with your eyeballs.
It's really weird. You can see her eyes. It's very strange. You can see her eyes on the inside. And then one day after we're filming, they said, look, we've got a setup around the corner. And they just had the camera there and they just filmed their eyes. And that's in the show when you see us putting it on.
Originally, the character would put on the headset and then you just go, there would be like a moment of black and then you go into the game. And kept kind of feeling like it's not quite right. There's something missing. And we were actually influenced by Severance in the elevator scenes, you know, where they have that kind of weird camera effect. We looked up how they did that. Ours was like, what if their eyes merged together and then came apart again?
Jesus, fuck.
Yep.
Having a WTF moment from Liam was essential.
It was a scripted line, but it was important because Wade, who is typically unflappable, this is the first time we've seen him really, really shaken.
I thought it was a reasonable reaction.
When we were designing the set design for Liam and Jess to stand in, it was important for me that they had tangible elements to work with, so that when Liam goes down and feels his head, he literally feels it. If it's too CG generated, it stops me buying into the space.
It's weird, because I remember seeing John Bradley did exactly the same thing. We reached down and grabbed the sand. That's your actor mind at work if you're thrown into this thing that is overwhelmingly visceral. The first thing you do is grab onto something tangible.
Every time we'd walk into the soundstage, there would be a quarter of this Mongolian castle. And in this case, the entire floor is sand. They've built like a hill made of sand as well for us to walk down. So, you know, that's practical when we're walking down and see Sophon there. They've built part of the decrepit buildings, so you actually get a sense of what's immediately there. Yeah, in the moment, the scale is real. And so you can actually look up and go, oh my God, what is happening here? It was crazy. And they would do that like overnight.
How long did it take you to discover agriculture?
Why don't you cut the shit and tell us? It's fun to swear at anyone. I'm Irish. It's in my blood. My character was driven by a very simple thing. When Jess's character says, so what's the plan here? And he goes, only advance. He has 2 words. That's his character, only advance. You know how I got this role? I was in discussions to do another big show. And I got a call from Dan and David. And they went, that thing you're talking to those people about? And I went, yeah, how did you know? They said, well, you're not going with them, you're coming with us. And I just went, yep, okay. And I hung up. And it was an easy yes. And then I got the script and I just laughed. Because I was thinking of books, he's a retired CIA guy, he's American, I think. And I just wrote and I went, oh man, these guys know me better than I know myself. They have incredible ear for tone and character. Who's she?
An AI. Or maybe one of them.
It's the first time he sees Sophon, who's played by the woman with the greatest name in showbiz, Si Shamuka. It's a fantastic name. There's small things that you do, like my body language when I saw Sophon. I mean, this is a woman who's got a samurai sword in her back. She's an immediate threat. I try to take a defensive stand. I'm kind of looking at her over the shoulder.
We didn't have a strong notion of what Sophon would look or sound like, so we got a lot of different tapes. And she popped out instantaneously because there was something eerie, yet calming, yet chilling, all at the same time, that she managed to modulate and make it seem interesting and not robotic. It's not an easy thing to do.
We actually gave her a scene from season 3, not knowing if we'd ever get to a season 3, but because it was one of her big scenes and we wanted to see how she could handle that, and that was what won her the job.
They look like us?
We don't look anything like this. This is all for your benefit.
What do you really look like?
You wouldn't like it.
We've talked a lot about their psychology, like what their evolution was like, what their differences are between humanity and the Santi. And as far as their physical appearance, I think the less said, the better.
We know what they tell us about themselves and what they show us about themselves, but what they show us is almost like an educational explanation for our benefits. They make themselves look like us. And then when you see one of us dehydrate and then rehydrate after getting chucked into a big pool of water, we have to assume that creatures that can do that don't look anything like us.
We are going to kill your science.
Jin has a super brain. I do a close-up on Jess, on Jin, at the moment where she is 2 steps ahead of Wade, and we see the horror start to cloud her as she realizes, oh, that's how they're going to do it. That's what they've been doing.
For Jin, science is like her religion. So killing science means you can't find any solutions, you can't hope for the future, you can't do anything. She can't do anything. You might as well be taking her life in that sense.
Buried deep in the philosophy of the novels is this notion that scientific or technological advancement is like the greatest of all virtues. So a civilization, a species that is technologically superior is superior in all ways. They are godlike. If they can access higher dimensions, they are essentially gods. So if they have cut off our science, there is literally no path for us to become anywhere close to where they are.
A computer the size of a subatomic particle unfolds from 10 dimensions and envelops the Earth. I really had no clue.
You've got to keep in mind that we can't see what the audience are going to see.
And then we'd all have to look over here and then maybe look slightly over there. Oh, wow. Quite tedious, actually.
Nothing is tangible in this sequence. It was all hypothetical and scientific.
Ideally, you don't want anyone rewinding anything. You don't want anyone pausing anything and looking something up on Wikipedia. So you want the explanation to flow in front of you as if you are understanding it the moment it enters your brain. And that took a lot of iterations. We wrote and rewrote and rewrote and rewrote and cut it together and watched it, rewrote and rewrote many, many times.
We knew it would be Liam, Jess, and C looking up at the sky, talking about something, but exactly what they were seeing was something we could afford to kick down the line in terms of development, so we did. But that left us in a place where once we were cutting these scenes together, we realized we had only the most rudimentary idea of what the images were going to be.
I spent, I don't know, maybe 3-4 days with an incredible storyboard artist in France, Stefan. And then Martin, the DP, joined us. And we started to literally blank canvas. We had nothing. David, Dan, and Alex said, just go fly, Minkie. Just do your thing. Just enjoy yourself. And I did.
It's all theoretical. Nobody really knows what this is or how it should look, even when you talk to a physicist, which we did.
Visualizing it is really difficult because you're visualizing the way that higher dimensional objects intersect with a 3-dimensional space. It took a lot of iteration with the VFX department to get something that looked both appropriate in terms of this is what it might look like and also looked cool.
One of the kind of points that was most important to Dan Weiss in particular was this notion of what does a 4-dimensional object in 3D space look like? And there are some mathematical models that kind of explain that and demonstrate it and show it. So that was a sort of fundamental building block for the animation that ultimately was.
The eye line for all 3 actors, to track the eye line of the Sophon coming from outer space through to right in front of the 3 of them. We tried all methods possible. In the end, it was back to good old-fashioned, really long pole with a tennis ball on the end of it and somebody running with it. But then, of course, the pole was so long to fit to be so high up that when it came to them, it being close to them, we had to have somebody overtake with a shorter pole to get, but it also couldn't travel through the camera because then it would be too much work for VFX. So it had to come from under the camera. So at this point, the actors had to do the visual drawing themselves.
Sophon, are you awake?
The person with the toughest job on that day was C. And she's got to explain quantum mechanics and quantum theory and entanglement and still look fabulous with a samurai sword on her back. She just knocked it out of the park on that day.
At the end of the first take, literally the entire cast and crew gave her a round of applause.
The "You Are Bug" sequence really was like, oh my gosh. I felt like that was a pin drop moment right from the beginning.
And it was 3 words. There wasn't going to be anything dripping in blood on the screens or anything like that. It's much more shocking when it's simple. The monster is in the words, not in the font.
We had a lot of conversation about the font and wanting to replicate kind of old school video game font. I think we thought it would look cool. I don't know if there was like a deeper...
War Games is kind of stuck in all of our minds as something that's, kind of chilling, and that kind of 80s font is ominous.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the Space Invaders font.
Shall we play a game?
When I read You Are Bugs, I loved that moment. I thought it was great, but it also kind of made me laugh. You Are Bugs sounds a little bit like something a second grader would say as an insult, but it felt like it needed a little bit of added punch for the adaptation. So we just wanted something else. And I remember we talked about, could they do something to the moon? Is there something absolutely insane that they could do to prove that they exist and that they're so much, so far beyond us, so far superior to us, that would let the whole world know, we're here and we're coming? We settled on the eye.
We were all asking Steve, how big is it? Where is it? He's like, we haven't figured that out yet. Just look up and be amazed. It's over there. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm amazed. I think it all read at the end, though.
The eye in the sky was a really interesting process to develop, because at first we thought, let's shoot a super close-up of somebody's, creepy eye looking down on you. And that kind of had a horror feel, but not necessarily a supernatural alien AI manipulation feel, if that makes any sense. Through a bunch of iterations, Dominic Vidal, our supervisor at Boof, came up with this sort of way of warping the sky to create the sense that there was an eye opening up in the middle of it.
That we thought was probably the most terrifying way we could convey the fact that compared to us, you are nothing but bugs. Just the feeling of how small humanity was compared to this superior species.
And we thought this was a good way for them to make everybody on Earth sort of cower in terror.
Everyone is cowering except for Tatiana, and I think what I love most about that sequence is the final shot. It reminds me of those old religious paintings, St. Francis in Ecstasy, of him looking up in wonder. And to me, it's rapture. It's like she's looking up, and this is final confirmation of something she's believed in for so long. But now it's her Lord has appeared before all of mankind to say, "Here I am." But that final shot really makes the whole thing come together, I think.
My first scene of the entire shoot, and I directed the lion's share of this show, but my first scene on the floor was Marlowe looking up at the eye. It was quite an extreme shot, the crane shot looking down on her. Marlowe has these beautiful glass blue eyes, but it was really painful for her, because when you have to look up at the sky and it's still not dark, it's really hard on blue eyes. Every time I called cut, I was like, go, Marlowe, duck your head, because I didn't want her eyes to get too pained by looking at the light.
Just the other day, we got to call our cast and say, we get to go to the end, folks, and this was very exciting, because for some of them particularly, their stories get so much bigger in the second season and the third season. So it was thrilling to learn that we're going to get to go to the end.
We knew we needed 3 or 4 seasons. 3 was always, to be honest, where we thought it was going to land, 3 in total. The one we shot and 2 more. So we'll end up with the number of episodes that we wanted to tell the whole story.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's the number of hours you need, and we're getting them. We know how many hours we need in order to get to the end, and it's significant. We have them, so we feel good about it.